Good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, July the 2nd, 2019. It is currently 10 a.m. Central Time. Now, this is a live broadcast. It is a live broadcast for the VBC 66 app. So I always have to take a few minutes just to let everyone know that if you're not using the VBC 66 app, please go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. The Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Do a search for VBC 66. VBC stands for Victory Baptist Church. The number 66 stands for the number of books in the Bible. VBC 66. Download the app. Once you have downloaded the app, well, number one, you can listen to us when we go live. Number two, you can listen to all the other content that is available to you. Church history, hermeneutics, philosophy, live radio, sermons, Bible studies, devotionals, you name it, it's all right there in the VBC 66 app. The live broadcast is really designed for the VBC 66 app. I know it's available. I know when I go live, it's available in a number of locations, but it's primarily for the VBC 66 app. That is what it's designed for. So what I tend to do is when I go live, I give it a few minutes because I send a notification out to everyone using the VBC 66 app saying, hey, I'm about to go live. Go to the live app talk section and give them a few minutes to tune in. So when I go live, there's always a few minutes of just kind of dealing with some basic information, and then we jump right in. Now, yesterday, so we'll do this. Let's just give some basic information, and then we'll kind of talk about the subject we're going to mention here. Now, this is going to be a short live broadcast because I have to leave here in a little bit. But I wanted to at least go live and try to get everyone focused on what I set out yesterday to kind of set as our week-long focus. So I want to kind of just remind everyone of that, add a little bit to the discussion, continue to challenge people on what we're trying to do this week. But before we do that, yesterday I received an email from one of our listeners who said, hey, you're currently studying the book of Romans. Now, this person was very optimistic. It'll probably be a 2 or 3 year study. That's overly optimistic. The way we're going, it's going to be about a 10-year study because we're going in depth. I mean, we are definitely going in depth. So he said, why don't you create a section on the VBC 66 app where all of the sermons for the book of Romans will be in one location? So this is what I did. On the VBC 66 app now, you have a section. In fact, I'll just pull up the VBC 66 app because I don't want to give you wrong information. On the VBC 66 app now, letting it open. Yes, if you go down, it says Romans Sermon Series. All right. And if you click on that, you'll find, well, all of the sermons, and not just the sermons, all the special podcasts and different things that I have done related to our study in the book of Romans. So it's all there. I try to place it in chronological order. It starts with the most current and goes down to the oldest. I think yesterday I said it starts with the oldest and goes to the newest, but that's not the case. When you open up that section, you're going to see the most current message in the book of Romans, and then it goes all the way down to the very beginning. It's been an interesting study so far. Definitely we are not taking the traditional route. We're definitely handling it in a different way. And part of the reason is there's been a million sermon series through the book of Romans. So I don't want to handle it in a very traditional way. And I don't typically teach in a very traditional way from the pulpit. I try to I just have a whole different view on the way I think too many churches, and I can say this as I'll just go ahead and I'm gonna go on a little rabbit trail here, okay? I think too many churches I think there's someone somewhere who has a memo, right? And they send the memo out and say, okay, all churches, this is the way you do church, right? Here's the template. This is how a pastor is supposed to speak, and this is the way you do it, and this is the structure of your sermon, and it's like, and if you go to church websites, they all kind of look the same. They all use the same kinds of language. In many cases, they use the same stock photos. Okay, because you'll be like, wait, I drive past that church. That's not how. No. And it's like, it's just like, it's almost like, why can't there be an alternative? Why can't it be different and still maintain biblical theology, a reverence to the scriptures, still maintain even a conservative approach to how church is done? It doesn't mean you have to go, seeker-sensitive, purpose-driven, emergent. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but you can operate within the biblical framework on how a church is supposed to do so, but without following the cookie-cutter template where everything looks the same, sounds the same. And the teaching, and so many times teaching is done in the church, it's just like you just show up and just listen. Okay, just listen. I'm not gonna really challenge you at all. And then when I speak, I'm gonna use lots of vague things. Like when I talk about sin, I'm going to use it vague. Or if I talk about sin in a harsh way, it's going to be sin outside of the church, not our problems. And so I will do things like, yes, we definitely are reformed in our soteriology, but that doesn't mean I won't offer criticism to the Protestant Reformation. But see, you do that, people get like, no, it's supposed to always be our team versus their team, and there's just so many rules on how you're supposed to do things. You'll get, pastors will hear my sermons. Well, you can't teach at that level because people won't understand. Why do I have to follow these unwritten rules that everyone just seem to agree upon? I didn't get the memo. Don't want the memo. You can keep the memo. My way of doing things may always result in only a few people at my church, but I would rather have a few people at my church than have to buy in to the way you're told that it has to be done. I just don't like that. So our study through Romans reflects that not a traditional way of doing things. I mean, challenging things are being said, blunt things are being said, things that challenge, and not only that, we're just not going with like, oh, okay, we're going through the book of Romans. You promote the series. Okay, well, it's going to be life changing. Your life will never be the same if you listen to our series in Romans. You do all the hype, you do all the promotion, and then every sermon has 3 points and a little prayer at the end, and it's like, no, we're going to dig into the book because the goal is to learn the book. The goal is to be challenged. So, for example, when we got to Romans chapter 1, verse 2, Paul here is telling us in Romans chapter 1, verse 2, that the gospel was promised beforehand, obviously referring to the Old Testament. Okay, so let's go back and consider Old Testament promises of the gospel. Well, wait a minute. Some of those scriptures we can look at and go, well, is that a promise of the gospel or is that not a promise of the gospel? So one of the best ways to figure this out is to look at when the New Testament cites one of those Old Testament passages and clearly relates it to the gospel, then we can say, oh, that's an Old Testament promise of the gospel. But then when we started looking at some of how the New Testament writers use the Old Testament, we're like, wait a minute. Sometimes it seems that they take the Old Testament passage and rip it completely out of its context. Oh, we've got a hermeneutical challenge, and that hermeneutical challenge is, how do we understand how New Testament writers use Old Testament passages of Scripture? So we went on, a 7 sermons, a 7-part series in the middle of our Romans series on looking at the hermeneutical issues related to how New Testament writers cite Old Testament passages of Scripture. That doesn't typically happen from the pulpit. Many would say it shouldn't, and that's fine. I will argue maybe it shouldn't, but here's the thing. Can it not happen somewhere? If you're going to say it shouldn't happen, does it have to be true everywhere? Can there be a church somewhere who says, no, we're going to study the hermeneutical issues related to New Testament writers' citations of the Old Testament? I mean, there's been hundreds of books written on the subject. There's seminary courses on the subject. Why can't it be talked from the pulpit? Is it supposed to be secret knowledge that only pastors have? Is it secret knowledge that you're supposed to learn in seminary but never tell anyone at your church? I don't like that idea. So our Roman series is radically different, and hopefully it will be beneficial to someone. Trust me, based on some emails, it's offended a lot of people, but that's okay. We just started. We haven't even really got to the parts that are controversial. So just want to throw that out there. I know I kind of took a little rabbit trail, but I do have strong opinions about how church is done, or how people believe church is to be done, and sometimes it drives me crazy. So just something to consider. All right, so let's do this. I was responding to a message from someone. While I'm live on the air, I'm getting a message going, no, I disagree. No, okay, here we go. Let's do this. This week, yesterday, when I say this week, starting yesterday for this week, I introduced that our week-long focus would be on the subject of manna. On the subject of manna. Now, the reason I came up with this idea to spend a week focusing on the subject of manna is because I came across a book on Sunday afternoon called, I think it was like Learn to Study the Bible, 40 Methods. And as soon as I saw the book, I'm like, wait, 40 methods of Bible study? All right, that has my attention because I've been teaching 12 methods of Bible study. It seems like my entire Christian life, I've been trying to teach people, here's 12 methods of Bible study. You need to use 12 methods of Bible study. Please study the Bible using these 12 methods. Doing everything I can from when I was teaching teenagers to teaching adults to teaching singles. It doesn't matter who you put me in front of. I was like, here are 12 methods of Bible study. Please use these 12 methods of Bible study. Sometimes it feels like you're just yelling, teaching a wall, because trying to get people to actually use the 12 methods of Bible study on a regular, consistent basis and their own regular, consistent time of Bible study. Yeah, I could have an entire discussion about that. So I thought, well, I'm going to read this book. So I started reading this book on these 40 methods of Bible study. Now, the first part, as I said yesterday in my message, there's nothing revolutionary. It sounded like I wrote those chapters. It was the same type of thing. Christians need to study the Bible. Christians need to study the Bible. Reading is not studying. Christians need, and they seem to be like, if we can just get Christians to study the Bible once a week, if we can, like that was their goal, weekly, one time a week, then we've accomplished something. Now, it's amazing how sometimes I am confused by how we approach, or how pastors or ministries challenge Christians. Millions of Christians watch an hour of television, 2 hours of television, 3 hours of television, more than a week, sometimes a day. If it's not television, they have other hobbies. They have other activities that they're willing to engage in every single day, and throughout the week. But to try to say, hey, Christians, spend more than, once a week, try to spend as many times in a week studying the Bible in some in-depth manner, that's almost seen as, that's not reasonable, that's not reality, that's not the way it's going to work. It's like, well, why can Christians have all these other hobbies, other things that they want, and we just say, well, that's okay. Maybe you can fit Bible study in somewhere. Why do we I don't understand our perspective, because what that is telling me is that the scriptures are not our priority. The scriptures are not what we claim they are our meat, our milk, our food, because we don't go without physical food. So I sometimes I think we've reached a point where, Christian ministries are like, hey, if I can get a Christian to study the Bible once in 12 months, I've accomplished something. And I think that that's kind of just a weird thing that has happened. But this book shoots for once a week. All right, great. Once a week. At this point, I'll take anything. So I was like, all right, that's an interesting approach. Other books, if you go back books 20 years ago, they definitely challenged for more. But I think in 2019, that's kind of where we are. So the first part was very basic. And then I got to the first method of Bible study, which they call daily bread. The daily bread method of Bible study. And I didn't even